I should have known better. Turning 35 felt like the perfect moment to finally center myself. Just one evening where it wouldn't be about managing expectations, fixing someone's mess, or fronting another bill under the banner of family. I booked the rooftop of my building. Champagne, soft jazz, people I actually liked. For once, I let myself hope. My name is Dory, and for most of my adult life, I've been the glue holding together people who didn't even notice they were pulling me apart. But that night was supposed to be different. That night was supposed to be mine. Until Lila, my younger sister, stood up with a champagne flute, her smile too wide, too rehearsed. Before Dory gives her little speech, I have an announcement, she chirped. Oscar and I are engaged. Applause erupted. Glasses clinked. My mother dabbed fake tears and clutched her pearls. My father barely looked up. And guess what? Lila said, beaming right at me. My amazing big sister Dory is going to be my maid of honor. And she's covering the whole wedding. We're getting married in Santorini. I don't remember what I said. Something like, of course. Something like, congratulations. But in that moment, as everyone else celebrated, I smiled and swallowed the familiar burn in my throat. They thought I would cave, again. They thought I'd pay, again. What they didn't know, I was already packing my bags. And this time, I wasn't just walking away. I was burning the entire playbook they wrote for me. The rest of the night passed in a blur of polite smiles and backhanded hugs. People came up to congratulate me, as if being volunteered to bankroll a destination wedding was a badge of honor. I played along. I always played along. That was the role I'd perfected since childhood. Lila basked in the attention like it was oxygen. My mother clung to her side, eyes gleaming with approval, while my father retreated into his usual role of absentee financier, silent unless money was involved. At one point, Lila leaned in to whisper, "You're not mad, are you? I mean, this is big, Dory. I couldn't wait to tell everyone." She didn't wait because she never had to. 4 years younger, prettier in that curated influencer way, and always the one the world made room for. She played the innocent little sister, while I played the responsible one. That meant I paid for college tuition she dropped halfway through, picked up our parents' mortgage when Dad's real estate gamble flopped, and yes, even funded Lila's emergency rhinoplasty after her breakup with a B-list DJ. They all thought I'd forgotten, but I hadn't. Later that night, when the last of the guests had trickled out and Lila left in Oscar's arms, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened the folder I'd been keeping on my laptop for years. I called it Contributions, a spreadsheet of every dime I'd ever poured into my family's endless pit. Tuition, $28,400. Mortgage, $45,000. Lila's emergency surgery, $12,700. Miscellaneous expenses, clothes, bills, flights, handouts, another $30,000 at least. Total? $216,412, not counting interest, not counting peace of mind. I stared at that number until it stopped looking like a dollar amount and started looking like motive. They thought I'd go along with this latest con, but they didn't know what I knew. This time, I had a plan, and it started with a single perfect lie. The next morning, I showed up to brunch wearing the same smile I'd worn my entire adult life, polished, polite, and completely false. My mother was already seated, fluttering through a bridal magazine, as if the engagement had been her own. My father barely looked up from his phone. Lila arrived 20 minutes late, dramatically waving her ring in the air like it hadn't already hijacked my birthday. "So," she chirped, sliding into the booth, "have you called the venue yet? They need the deposit by Monday." I took a sip of coffee and nodded, slow and steady. "Of course, I'll handle it." That was all they needed to hear. They didn't ask how or when. They never did, because I had always delivered. Only this time, I wouldn't. Instead, that afternoon, I confirmed my transfer to our company's European office, a move I'd been quietly arranging for 3 months. Barcelona, a city where no one knew me as the problem solver, a place where I didn't have to be their safety net anymore. By Monday, I'd closed every joint account Lila had access to. The credit cards I'd stupidly co-signed for her, canceled. I watched the notifications come in like dominoes falling. Transaction declined. Card no longer valid. Insufficient funds. She texted me in a panic. Hey, sis, something's wrong with the joint card. Can you fix it? I replied, looking into it. Must be a bank error. Don't worry, I've got it. Then I opened a new spreadsheet titled Phase 2, Dismantled Gently. I spent the next week building a web of perfectly crafted illusions, fake vendor emails, mock contracts, bogus schedules. I even photoshopped a venue confirmation email with a fake contact in Santorini named Elena Papadopoulos. Lila ate it all up. One evening, she barged into my office unannounced, practically vibrating with excitement. The planner says we need to get moving on floral design. Do you have the number for that Athens vendor? I didn't skip a beat. Elena's finalizing her quote. She says she can knock 20 grand off if we confirm this week. See? Lila beamed. I knew you'd make it perfect. She kissed my cheek and floated out of the room, and I went right back to packing. By then, my lease in Barcelona was signed, movers scheduled, my apartment officially listed with a realtor. Even my HR department thought I was going to Phoenix for a leadership retreat. I'd left them just enough breadcrumbs to believe the story I wanted them to believe. Oscar, of course, started getting anxious. He began calling daily, asking about deposits and dress fittings and vendor timelines. I gave him the same line every time. Don't worry, it's all under control. I knew it wasn't wedding jitters. It was money jitters. Because what Lila didn't know, and what I confirmed through the private investigator I hired, was that Oscar's family wasn't rich, not even close. His big inheritance? A pile of debt tied up in a failed import business. He was counting on my money just as much as Lila was. And that made the game more interesting. At night, I would lie in bed and scroll through emails I'd scheduled to auto-send, fake updates, payment confirmations, progress reports, each one carefully worded to delay, confuse, and reassure. Meanwhile, I emptied accounts, tied up loose ends, deleted myself, one system at a time. They still thought I was handling everything. They had no idea they were standing on sand, and the tide was already rising. 2 weeks before I left, the cracks started showing. Lila called me 5 times in one day, frantic over the bridesmaids' dresses. Apparently, the boutique claimed they hadn't received any deposit. But I told them you'd handle it, she whined over voicemail. You said you'd call Elena. I didn't return the call. Instead, I texted, meetings all day. We'll circle back tonight. Everything's under control. That phrase had become my shield. It was short, vague, and just comforting enough to keep them believing the fantasy. And that fantasy was the only thing holding their plans together. At work, I minimized my real projects behind spreadsheets full of fake vendor timelines. I even created a fake event planning folder in case someone from HR wandered by my desk. Meanwhile, I met weekly with my Barcelona manager over encrypted calls, finalizing details for the transfer. I was 3 weeks out, and they still didn't know. That's when Oscar showed up at my office, unannounced. He smiled like he thought it would disarm me. It didn't. Hey, he said, settling into the guest chair. Just wanted to check in. You know, make sure everything's on track. Lisa's a little overwhelmed. I nodded, playing the game. Of course, completely on track. Great. He glanced around my office, eyes scanning my screen. You're a lifesaver, Dory. Seriously, we'd be lost without you. I smiled, even as I imagined torching every part of his fake charm. After he left, I updated my detonation schedule. That's what I called it. An actual color-coded countdown to the day I disappeared. Flights confirmed, final wire transfers scheduled, all assets moved to an offshore account. Even my mail forwarding was in place. They weren't just going to be surprised. They were going to be erased from my life. Simone, my best friend since college, and the only person I trusted, called that night. They still buying it? Hook, line, and mortgage, I said, flipping through a photo album of childhood holidays. Lila always front and center, me just out of frame. Simone exhaled. Dory, you sure you don't want to just tell them off? Like explode in public? That's their language. Chaos, tears, drama. I speak in consequences. She paused. Damn! You've rehearsed that line, haven't you? Twice, maybe 3 times. We both laughed. But the truth was, I'd rehearsed all of it. Every step, every withdrawal, every lie. Because for once in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. Lila sent another message the next morning. Venue says they haven't received the contract. Can you resend? I replied with a screenshot of a fake email chain, CC'd with a phony Elena and a PDF with Greek words I copied from a travel blog. Already resent. Probably a delay on their end. I'll follow up. She didn't thank me. She never did. She just sent a selfie of her holding a bridal catalog with the caption, "We'll make it perfect thanks to you." And all I could think was, no, Lila, we won't, but you'll remember me forever. They thought they were in control, that I was still quietly managing everything from behind the scenes, just like I always had. But the first real fracture appeared the day of the bridal shower. It was supposed to be hosted at my apartment, or so Lisa told everyone. Invitations had gone out, guests were dressed, balloons were ordered, and Lila had made an Instagram story the night before with a caption that read, "Can't wait to celebrate at my sister's place tomorrow. She always makes everything magical." What she didn't know was that my place had sold 3 days prior. I was already in Barcelona, while Lisa and my parents were circling the building in Manhattan, trying to get past security. I was having café con leche on my new balcony, watching the Mediterranean sun rise over the Gothic Quarter. Simone, who'd volunteered to be my eyes on the ground, sent me updates like she was covering a red carpet disaster. "They're here," she texted. "Lisa's screaming at the doorman. Your mom is fake crying into a lace napkin." I laughed. "Let me guess. She's saying I forgot my own hosting duties?" "Nope," Simone replied. "She just asked the new owners to let her in because her daughter lives there." "Correction," I sent back. "Used to live there." The retired couple I sold the apartment to had moved in the day before. When Lisa tried to force her way in, they called the building manager. And when the building manager refused to help, she called me. 6 times. Then she texted, "What the hell is going on? Why are there strangers in your apartment?" I didn't answer. Instead, I posted an Instagram story of a cobblestone alleyway lined with red-tiled balconies, a sangria in my hand, and the caption, "Freedom tastes like citrus and silence." 10 minutes later, all hell broke loose. My phone blew up with missed calls. Lisa, Mom, Dad, even Oscar. My inbox flooded with passive-aggressive emails. "Where are the deposits? Why isn't anyone answering at the venue? Have you confirmed the caterer?" Even the wedding planner joined in, CCing me on her latest message. "We will be canceling all arrangements unless we receive confirmation and payment by EOD." Still, I stayed quiet. Simone kept sending play-by-plays. "Lisa's crying in the lobby now. She just called Oscar useless. He looks ready to bolt. Your mom's asking the doorman if you've had a mental breakdown. They're calling every real estate agent in the city to figure out what happened to the apartment." At one point, my father texted me, "You are tearing this family apart." And I almost laughed out loud. Because it wasn't me who tore anything apart. They had built the whole thing on the illusion that I was dependable, controllable. They expected me to keep playing the role I never auditioned for. But I'd already burned the script. Lisa always believed that if she cried hard enough, someone would come fix it. Usually, that someone was me. But not this time. The morning after the bridal shower disaster, she sent a flurry of messages, each more frantic than the last. "I'm flying to Barcelona. We need to fix this, together. I know you're upset, but you don't have to run away. Please, Dory, just explain why you're doing this." I didn't answer. Instead, I checked her flight number. Yes, Simone had already found it, and confirmed she'd be arriving the next day. Except, her passport had expired 5 years ago. Simone texted, "She's booked the flight, but TSA might stop her before Spain does." "She won't get past immigration," I replied. I made sure of that. Weeks earlier, I'd filed a quiet report through the Spanish consulate's online system. It flagged Lisa as a potential financial liability based on a documented history of unpaid debts and suspicious transactions. I used her real name, her real birthday, her real mess, just like she'd used mine. So, when she landed in Madrid, Lisa was immediately pulled into a secondary screening room. Simone's contact at the airport filmed the aftermath. Lisa, red-faced and sobbing, waving a folder of bridal mood boards at a tired customs officer. By the time she was escorted to the next available flight home, she'd made a scene in 2 languages, and not one person was rushing in to save her. That night, I met Jerome for dinner. Yes, the same Jerome who left me 2 years ago because I was too married to my family's problems. Apparently, watching me dismantle those problems from a distance had reignited something in him. Or maybe he just missed having dinner with someone who didn't ask for money between courses. We drank Rioja on a rooftop as the city glittered around us. He smiled over his glass. "You're glowing, you know." "That's called peace," I said. "It's new." My phone buzzed. "Lisa." I sighed, held up the screen. "Showtime?" He nodded. "Let her speak, but only once." I answered and put it on the speaker. Lisa's voice cracked immediately. "You planned this. You knew I couldn't get into Spain." "You're right," I said calmly. "I did." "But you've always helped me." "Not anymore." There was a pause. "What am I supposed to do now?" "Start with a job, maybe 2. You've got bills to pay." Another pause. Then she tried a different tactic. "Oscar left. He said I lied to him, that I never confirmed the venue, that I forged your signature. Did you?" I was trying to buy time. You said you'd handle it." "No, you said I would, and then you forged my name." Silence. I opened a folder on my laptop and pulled up the scanned documents. Signatures, emails, text messages. All of it neatly organized. "You're in real trouble, Lisa." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Oscar says he's filing charges." "Good. Maybe that'll finally get your attention." "And Mom and Dad? They're devastated. They said you broke the family." "They said that when I refused to co-sign another loan for their kitchen remodel. Forgive me if I'm less than moved." I could hear her breathing, ragged, unsure. "I'm sorry, Dory, really. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't mean to." "You didn't care to know, that's the difference." And with that, I hung up. She messaged me again 2 hours later. "Please, just one more chance." I replied with one sentence. "One chance is all you ever got." The next morning, Oscar's lawyer emailed me, requesting a formal statement for the fraud case. I sent him everything: documents, screenshots, payment records. Within the hour, he confirmed that Lisa had agreed to a written confession in exchange for a reduced settlement. That same day, a viral wedding blog published the full story. Scammer Bride of Barcelona, the $200K fantasy that crashed and burned. Simone texted, "Your sister's trending." I opened Twitter to see Lisa's meltdown playing out in real time. Her GoFundMe had been shut down, vendors were publicly calling her out. And somewhere in the middle of it all, she'd posted a photo of us from 10 years ago. Me holding a cake, her blowing out the candles. The caption read, "I didn't realize how much I took until she stopped giving." Too little, too late, my father tried calling that evening. I let it go to voicemail. His voice for once wasn't angry, it was small. "Dory, we didn't know. We didn't mean for it to go this far." No, they never meant to get caught. The chaos didn't end overnight. Lisa's name trended for 3 days. Wedding blogs dissected every detail of her destination scam, and vendors lined up to tell their side of the story. My inbox overflowed with messages, from relatives choosing sides, from strangers asking if it was real, and from my parents, alternating between denial and guilt. I responded to none of it. Instead, I adjusted the pillows on my Barcelona balcony chair, refilled my wine glass, and opened my laptop to a new email. "Senior Strategy Director, offer confirmed." I smiled. This time, the title was mine. No strings, no favors, no family debts dragging behind me like a chain. Simone called. "Your mom's crying on Facebook Live again. Lisa's hiding out at home. Oscar's lawyer says she's trying to negotiate a reduced settlement. You good?" I'm perfect. Because this was never about revenge. Not really. Revenge is reactive. This? This was liberation. I didn't destroy my family. I simply stopped financing their delusions. They called it betrayal, abandonment, cruelty. But I called it truth. A truth I'd swallowed for years while they mistook my silence for consent. I was done explaining, done justifying, done saving people who only saw me as useful. Lisa emailed one last time. "I'm sorry, I'm trying to change." I didn't respond. Some chapters don't need closure. They just need to end. And this one? It was mine to write, from the very beginning to the very last word. I didn't disappear. I finally showed up. For myself. My name is Kelsey Whitmore. And if you ask my father, I'm just the shadow that trails behind his favorite daughter. Growing up, whenever we met someone new, he'd smile proudly and say, "This is Charlotte, our future lawyer." And then with a shrug, "And her sister." No name. No mention of my scholarship, my research, my startup. Just her sister. Like I was a footnote in a story he didn't want to tell. I used to wonder if I was being too sensitive. Until Charlotte's high school graduation, when I stood 3 feet from him and he raised his glass, saying, "To my one and only star." I wasn't on the banner. I wasn't in the family photo. They didn't even crop me out. They retook it without me. No one ever said I was disowned. But I learned that you don't need a fight to be forgotten. You just need to be quiet long enough for them to build a version of the family where you were never there. So I got quiet. For years. Until one Tuesday, when an email from the alumni office popped up. Eastern University, Class of 2025, Commencement Highlights. I nearly deleted it, but one line caught my eye. Keynote speaker. CEO of one of North America's fastest-growing medtech startups. No name, just a silhouette. But I knew it was me, and I knew they didn't, not yet. When I say my family forgot me, I don't mean it happened all at once. It's not like someone slammed a door or screamed me out of the room. It happened in whispers, in the pauses between introductions, in the empty space where my name used to belong. It started with Charlotte's achievements. She was always brilliant, valedictorian, debate champion, scholarship darling. I admired her, I really did. But admiration has a funny way of turning sour when it's served with silence. Every time she won something, my parents' eyes lit up, and mine dimmed by contrast. It wasn't that I failed. I just wasn't interesting enough to mention. When I got accepted to college, there was no family dinner, no card, no Facebook post, just a nod from my dad that felt more like a formality than pride. "That's good, Kel," he said, flipping through a newspaper. Still, I tried. I came home for holidays, brought little gifts, asked about their lives. They answered, but never asked about mine. And eventually, I stopped showing up. One Christmas, I received a card from them. Well, technically. It was a glossy photo of the whole family in matching red outfits, even the dog, posed in front of the fireplace. In the exact spot where I'd stood the year before, Charlotte now stood, holding the dog, flanked by my parents. They didn't just crop me out. They replaced me. The caption read, "Love from all of us." That was the year I stopped wondering what I did wrong. Instead, I asked myself a different question. What happens when no one notices you're gone? It's a quiet kind of grief, not loud, not cinematic, just a slow erosion of worth. You start to disappear in your own reflection. Your voice softens, your opinions shrink. You make yourself smaller to take up less space, because no one seems to want you in the room anyway. I buried myself in work, not the kind they could brag about at brunch, but the kind that built something real. I joined a small research project in rural healthcare infrastructure. It was underfunded, barely staffed, and no one expected it to go anywhere. But I saw something in it, potential, impact, purpose. And I wanted to pour everything I had into it. So I did. I stayed up nights filing grant applications under a pseudonym, soldering prototype equipment in my dorm hallway, chasing contracts no one thought I'd land. I didn't put my real name on the early papers. I didn't want to be found, not yet. I wasn't hiding out of shame. I was building in peace. My mother once told me, "You don't have to be loud to be powerful." She died before any of this happened, before I became something worth talking about. But her voice lingered in my head when I was alone, pushing me to keep going, even when no one clapped. By the time I turned 27, the startup had become something more than a side project. We had traction, we had users, we had funding, And still, no one in my family knew or cared. And I preferred it that way until I saw that email. The keynote investor, the one being whispered about on campus, the one no one had ever seen in person, that was me. And suddenly, for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to show up, not to beg for a seat at their table, but to prove I'd built my own. I didn't build the company out of ambition. Not at first. I built it out of necessity, out of silence, out of the aching, stretching need to matter somewhere, anywhere, even if it was under a name no one recognized. The startup began as a research initiative in a forgotten corner of the university, focused on rural medical access. I wasn't even listed as a lead. I was the quiet kid in the back who knew how to stretch a $200 grant into 6 weeks of working prototypes. Most days, I skipped meals to buy parts. I'd fall asleep in the engineering building between classes. No one noticed, no one asked, and it was better that way. The fewer eyes on me, the more I could create. I gave the project a name, Metfir, drawn from an old word meaning to carry across. That's all I wanted, to carry care across the gaps the system ignored. Small towns, neglected clinics, outdated tools. Everyone wanted to solve urban healthcare, but no one looked out past the suburbs. I did, because that's where I felt most like myself, on the edge of the map. We got our first traction through a local pilot, then a second. I filed every legal document through an alias, not just for privacy, but because I didn't want any connection to the Whitmore name. I didn't want the startup to be something my father could claim credit for once it succeeded. I didn't want Charlotte's friends whispering about how we were sisters, as if that gave her a slice of my work. I wanted it clean, independent, invisible. And for a while it was. We grew through word of mouth and angel investors. I kept my head down. My CTO, Owen, knew my real name, but he never used it outside private emails. Our team respected the boundary without question. They knew there was history I didn't talk about. They didn't push. They just followed the vision, and that was enough. We hired slowly, intentionally. No buzz, no headlines, no press kits. Our software reached over 24 rural networks before anyone outside the industry even realized we existed. And even then, the face of the company remained blank, on purpose. Then came the Summit Invitation, a major investor event hosted by Eastern University, my former campus, and Charlotte's soon-to-be alma mater. It was a full-circle moment I didn't ask for. At first, I ignored the invite. I figured it was spam, but the subject line said, Commencement Weekend Keynote Invitation, Unconfirmed CEO. I opened it on a whim, already planning to delete it, but when I read the itinerary, my stomach dropped. The keynote slot, slated to begin just 40 minutes after Charlotte's graduation ceremony, was reserved. For me, not by name, not publicly, but someone had tracked the IPs, the filings, the grants. Someone had done the math. They knew, even if they weren't sure. They suspected. And now, so did I. A second email came hours later, this one from my aunt, sent to the whole family chain by accident. Graduation updates, catering menu, seating chart. At the bottom, one note from my father. Make sure Kelsey doesn't hear about it. Last thing we need is a distraction on Charlotte's big day. Distraction. That word didn't sting. It sliced. It wasn't carelessness, it was coordination. My absence wasn't just accepted. It was planned. I stared at the screen, unmoving. Not angry, not sad, just cold. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to ruin their event. I wasn't going to shout or cry or beg to be seen. I was going to be exactly what they feared most, present. I didn't pack much. Just a black blazer, one understated dress, and the low heels I hadn't worn since pitching our first major funding round. I wasn't going for glamour. I was going for precision. On the train ride back to campus, I passed familiar places. The coffee shop where I used to write code between shifts. The science building where I once slept on a bench during finals week. That version of me, tired, invisible, felt like someone I used to know. Someone I'd buried without ever holding a funeral. I arrived the night before graduation. Checked into a small hotel, no room service, no fanfare. I reviewed the summit deck alone in my room, lit only by the soft glow of my laptop. Data slides, case studies, market projections, all clean, sharp, and untraceable to anyone who ever doubted me. And then I opened the graduation ticket portal. Under guest name, I didn't type Kelsey Whitmore. I used a variation, just initials. Enough to blend in. Enough to get close without setting off alarms. I picked a front row seat, right in the middle of the parents section. Let's call it poetic proximity. The next morning, the sun was already high when I arrived at the venue. My heart didn't pound. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The usher scanned my ticket and smiled. Reserved early, front row. Looks like someone really wanted you here. I smiled back. I guess they did. I sat, third seat from the aisle. The seats around me slowly filled. Parents, siblings, grandparents with handheld camcorders. I scanned the crowd, then the stage. And then I saw her. Charlotte. Her cap was perfectly centered, gown crisp and camera ready. She sat with her back straight, chin tilted just slightly. A practiced pose. I knew it well. She wore it every time she needed to perform. 2 rows behind me, I heard a familiar voice. Low, firm, controlled. My father. He was speaking to someone. Security, maybe. Clipboard, radio. He wasn't yelling, but his tone had a sharpness I knew too well. The kind that could cut through silence without ever raising volume. I kept my eyes forward. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Let him scan the crowd. Let him wonder. Let him squint and question the shape of the woman in the front row. The usher returned. Ma'am, just confirming for the seating log. Name? I handed her my ticket. She nodded, scribbled, moved on. No suspicion, just another proud guest. A professor passed by, then stopped mid-step. He looked at me once, then again. You're Kelsey Whitmore, aren't you? I didn't answer. I just smiled. He leaned in, lowering his voice. Your case study on rural health infrastructure. Brilliant work. I use it in my seminar. 2 parents turned to look. My father's voice rose again behind me. She's not supposed to be here. She's not on the list. But no one moved to remove me. I wasn't a threat. I was a mystery, and mysteries don't get kicked out. They get investigated. The loudspeakers clicked on. The ceremony was starting. Charlotte's name would be read soon. But this time, she wouldn't be the only Whitmore anyone remembered. I left my seat just as Charlotte's department head took the podium. I didn't wait to hear her name. I didn't need to. I wasn't there to witness her moment. I had my own. Across the quad, the investor summit was already underway. The air inside the glass auditorium was cooler, quieter, more focused. My assistant met me at the side entrance with the final slide deck in hand. All set, she whispered. They still don't know it's you. Even the dean thinks Metfear's CEO is some reclusive Harvard grad. I gave a slight nod and flipped through the presentation. Metrics, projections, case studies. It was solid, but something about the final slide felt too polite. It just said, thank you, safe, forgettable. I deleted it, typed a new title, Kelsey Whitmore, Eastern University, class of never. Underneath, you erased me, so I built something permanent. My assistant leaned over my shoulder and blinked. That's bold. It's honest. She didn't argue. Backstage, the moderator's voice echoed through the speakers. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Metfear. I stepped into the lights. They didn't feel hot. The stage didn't feel high. I didn't feel small. The audience turned. Trustees, professors, industry leaders, students. I didn't bring notes. I didn't need them. I built Metfear, I began, because no one in my family thought I could finish anything, and they weren't entirely wrong. I didn't finish college. I didn't finish Thanksgiving dinners. I didn't finish being the daughter they wanted. Pause. But I finished this. Click. Slide change. A map of rural health expansions. Then photos, partnerships, renovated clinics, the faces of people we'd helped. Click. One grainy image. Me, 6 years ago, hunched in a hallway with wires and a soldering iron. The room was quiet, focused, listening. And then, movement. Second row, stage left. A professor leaned towards someone wearing a cap and gown. "You didn't tell me she was your sister," he said, not realizing his mic picked it up. Charlotte stiffened. The professor looked back at me, then nodded. "Nice work, CEO." And that was the moment. Not the applause that followed. Not the headlines that came hours later. Not even the messages I'd soon receive from people who'd once forgotten I existed. It was that one line, from the one person Charlotte desperately wanted to impress. Spoken aloud, in public, into a microphone she couldn't control. I didn't linger on stage. No photo ops, no press interviews. I exited through the back hallway, while the applause still echoed behind me, bouncing off the glass walls like a memory refusing to fade. By the time I reached the hotel lobby, my phone had already begun buzzing. 37 unread messages, 6 missed calls, all unknown numbers. And then one text from my cousin. "Was that you on stage? Dad nearly choked." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The clip had already gone viral. The professor's voice, "Nice work, CEO," was being looped, subtweeted, reposted. I saw screenshots of Charlotte's frozen expressions circulating on student forums. The shot of me standing in front of the screen, with my name in bold white font, was already becoming its own moment. And through all of it, I stayed quiet. I didn't tag the university. I didn't post a caption. I didn't even follow up with the organizers. But I knew they saw it. Because 2 hours later, Charlotte's graduation photo disappeared from my father's Facebook page, replaced by a quote about humility. Classic. Charlotte didn't post anything either. No "so proud of my journey" or "thank you to my amazing family." Just one carefully filtered shot of her gown. No smile, no tags, no context. The silence was louder than any apology could have been. That weekend, my inbox turned into a strange museum of ghosts. A message from my father's college friend. "Greg mentioned you started something in healthcare. Our son just graduated. Would love to connect." An email from Charlotte's boyfriend, who'd once barely said hello to me at family functions. "Didn't realize Met Fear was yours. Truly impressive. Let me know if you're ever building a legal team." And the boldest of all, a distant cousin who hadn't spoken to me in a decade. "Hey, Kels, long time. Saw the keynote. Wow. Any chance you're hiring interns this summer?" None of them mentioned Charlotte. None of them mentioned the years they'd spent pretending I didn't exist. They just wanted in. I didn't respond to most of them, but I forwarded one message to my assistant with a note. "Add this to the not in this lifetime list." She replied with a thumbs up and a skull emoji. I stared at the screen for a long time. They'd once called me a dropout, said I was lucky to have any job at all, warned me not to embarrass the family name. And now they wanted desk jobs, referrals, recommendations. But the version of me they ignored? She didn't exist anymore. I never had to raise my voice. I just raised the bar. They tried to bury me in silence. But I came back with something louder. And this time they couldn't look away. I never went back to the house. Not when my father sent word through a cousin. Not when Charlotte posted a vague quote about rebuilding bridges. Not even when an aunt called just to check in after 5 years of silence. I knew what they were doing. It wasn't remorse. It was reputation management. They didn't want me back. They just didn't want to look like the people who'd pushed me out. There was nothing for me there anyway. Not in the room with the peeling wallpaper where my childhood trophies used to gather dust. Not in the garden my mother once loved, now overgrown and sour from neglect. Not in the family dinners where my chair had long been quietly removed. But I did return, in ways they never expected. I returned in the keynote clips embedded in university ethics courses. I returned in healthcare pilot programs using our software. I returned in late-night student discussions quoting my work, not knowing the name once belonged to a girl their professor had called a distraction. I had become someone they couldn't hold, couldn't reshape, couldn't take credit for. And that was the final gift. They tried to erase me with silence, but silence isn't absence. It's space. And I filled it. With code, with care, with something so deeply mine they could no longer claim it, question it, or contain it. A professor from Eastern University mailed me a handwritten note months later. It was short. "We've added your keynote to our curriculum. Under legacy and resilience. Legacy. It used to sound like a word meant for someone else, a name etched into a family tree I'd been pruned from. Now it belonged to me. They once called me a mistake, a ghost, a problem best forgotten. But I didn't fight for space at their table. I built a building next door, and this time, no one could ignore the name on the doorplate. Kelsey Whitmore, CEO. Unforgettable.